I'm going to be quite fast because of the time, but of course, feel free to stop me at any point if you have a question to ask. And also note that during the course of the tutorial, as I'm presenting now, there are some live questions I'll pose. So please be attentive. And they're objective questions. So when I get to those slides, you see a question pop up, and I'll pause and wait for your answers before I proceed. So all you need to do is to type your answers in the chat box, and we'll proceed from there. The answers are provided anyway. And after the tutorial, this material will also be available to you on the 4Ways site. So you don't have to worry about, writing down notes or downloading it at this point. All right. So basically, I'm going to just talk about the basics of nuclear magnetic resonance, which is the source of the NMR signal, and then relate that to some basics in MRI and contrast in MRI as well. And then just one slide to remind ourselves about the components of the MRI system, and then that's where I would end it. So nuclear magnetic resonance is a technique where we send in the frequency pulse into a distribution of hydrogen nuclei and perturb them in such a manner that when we switch off the pulse, which is why it's called a pulse, it comes on and off. So when we switch it on, the alignment of the nuclear spins will be perturbed or will be changed according to the angle of the RF pulse. When the pulse is switched back off, the spins relax, and in the process of relaxation, they emit the nuclear magnetic resonance signal, which we then collect and then manipulate that to create the image we want. Now, the fundamental requirement of any specimen that needs to be imaged using MRI is that the specimen should have hydrogen nuclei. And in the human body, water constitutes more than 70% of the human anatomy. And within water, we can find loads of hydrogen atoms. And so the hydrogen, within the hydrogen nuclei, it has two properties that we exploit to do MRI. And these two properties are the tendency of the hydrogen nuclei to be influenced by an external magnetic field, which is what we call magnetic dipole moment. And the second is when it is perturbed by an external magnetic field, it has two states it can respond in, which is called spin. So it can either align with or against the external field. So we can have a spin of negative half or positive half, depending on the orientation. And so that gives the hydrogen nucleus a sort of a small, tiny bar magnetic property. So it looks much like a magnet with two extreme ends with different polarities. So when we place the human body inside of the MRI scanner, all the hydrogen nuclei in the body will be aligned along the B0 axis. The B0 axis here is the direction of the magnetic field, the static magnetic field inside of the ball of the magnet. So when we now place the human body inside of the scanner, because the hydrogen nuclei behave like tiny biomagnets, they all would align in the direction of the external magnetic field. In practice, not all of them do this. Some of them would be aligned in opposing directions to the B0 field. And so the difference in these alignments gives rise to the amount of signal we collect in MRI. And how it works out is that those that align against would neutralize those aligned with the field, leaving a small amount of the spins aligned with the field. And those are the ones we manipulate with a radio frequency pulse to give rise to the nuclear magnetic resonance signal. And so we call in theory the total alignment of the spins a magnetization vector M, which is the blue line or blue arrow you're looking at here, aligned with the field. So in their alignment position, they precess about their mean position at what we call Lamour frequency. The Lamour frequency of precession is dependent on the field strength at which we are imaging. And so at 1.5 Tesla, it's about 64 megahertz. Let me go to the next slide. Yes, it's about 64 megahertz. Forget about the equation at the top here. It's just giving us the expression for the Lamour frequency. We are technologists, so I wouldn't want to touch so much on theory. Our focus is on the precessional frequency of the spins as the human body is inside of the scanner. Now, let me pause here and ask the first question. And I'll need you to type out your answers. The question says the magnetization vector created by the spin system originates from which one of these combinations?
Orbital momentum and electronic spin.
Wow, perfect, perfect. So that's the answer. Yes, so this is not to test you, but to keep you attentive. All right, so let's proceed. So orbital momentum and electron spin, I've already mentioned that in the previous slides. So we proceed. So if we are now going to perturb this magnetization vector M, we would have to send in a radio frequency pulse at the same frequency as the precessional frequency. That is where the name resonance comes from. The perturbing energy is at the same frequency as the precessional frequency of the spins, and that's what we call resonance. So when we send in the radio frequency pulse, it has the characteristic of pushing down the spins in a direction towards an angle equivalent to the angle it is created to do the perturbation at. So, for example, the commonest excitation pulse we use is 90-degree radio frequency pulse. And this is what it does. When we apply it to the human body, the spins that are aligned parallel to the static field are then pushed down to 90 degrees relative to the original position it was at. Now we switch it back off. When it is switched back off, they then relax back to their original position. And so that process of relaxation is what leads to the release of the nuclear magnetic resonance signal. And that's what we then collect back using the radio frequency coil again. So it can send in and also receive the signal back, which is what we then would Fourier transform. It's a mathematical procedure we do to convert the signals to the image. But it's not that straightforward. I'll mention gradients as well. So when we want to continuously excite the spins, we then would apply a series of the activation or excitation pulses. Or if even we are not exciting continuously, there are cases where we can also flip the spins. So just the series of the pulses we apply constitutes what is called pulse sequence. And the time interval between one pulse and the next is the repetition time, because we are repeating the application of the radio frequency pulse. Now, let me pause and again ask, which of the following radio frequency pulses is used for spin excitation? 180-degree, 90, or a sequence of 180 and 90? Any idea? All right. The answers are coming. Wow.
Both
I'm glad.
90 and 180 degree are a pulse, I think.
Most people have had it correctly. Perfect. All right.
C.
So
C.
yes, so I'll explain that shortly. So this is the answer. And you know why? 90-degree RF pulse does excitation because it is a pulse that we apply to tip the M naught 90 degrees, and then we switch it off and it relaxes to release the signal. So we call that excitation pulse. The 180-degree pulse is an inversion pulse. I'll explain that when we get to the spin echo sequence. Inversion, let me not explain it now. Let me get there first. So we will get there. All right. So the excitation pulse is 90 degrees. Now we have finished discussing nuclear magnetic resonance theory.
Hello, Doc.
Yes, please.
You said what pulse? So then 180 degrees RF applied during an inversion.
Yes,
It's
inversion.
it's still an example of an excitation pulse.
Mm,
Unless I just want to know whether it is because
no, it's no, the inversion here is meant to change the orientation of the excited spins.
So, but the spins are still excited. In quotes.
Yeah, but you'd have excited them first using the 90-degree pulse. But of course, where you apply 180, the 180 does not give you the signal. When I get to spin
Okay,
echo,
sir.
what
Okay,
the 180 does is, for example, if the M naught is standing vertically up and you apply 180, it is inverted downwards, right? And in NMR theory, we do not read a signal in the vertical plane, but rather in the transverse plane. And it is the 90-degree pulse you apply to tip it onto the transverse plane so that it can now give out the signal. I'll get there. I will explain that again. When we get to T2 relaxation. Can I proceed? All right. So we're not going to explain how what we've just discussed relates to MRI. So in MRI, the signal we have just produced, if it were in the human body, what we would see would be a collection of many signals distributed across the human body. And if we're to tap or collect all of these information, we are not going to have any defined image. We can see contrast. We can see differences amongst the various organs or anatomies, nothing. So what we need to do is to apply gradients to vary the signal intensities across the body we are imaging, and also to selectively say this is what we want to image. Otherwise, once the human body is activated, we are imaging whatever is activated. So the application of a series of other gradients to lead to this is what gives us MRI. So the bottom blue line gives the mathematical expression that tells us that if we need to vary the B naught, which is the external magnetic field, there are gradient coils that are built into the magnet, such that when they are activated, they vary the B naught, the external magnetic field, across the human body. So this is what it does. If the gradient is applied, that is the green arrows you are seeing beneath the black arrows, those that are down would subtract the lines that are within their direction, and those that are up would be added. And in the end, the effect is what we see at the bottom as the total field. And this is exactly what happens to the magnetic field when the gradients are switched on. And there are 3 gradient coils that we apply during imaging. The first one, frequency encoding. What it does is that it maps position to frequency. So if a particular anatomy is at a particular location, its frequency varies slightly from the center frequency. And we've already stated that at 1.5 Tesla, the center frequency is 64 megahertz. So frequency encoding would give varying frequencies to various parts of the body in such a way that some would be exactly at the center frequency, and some would be above slightly, some would be below. So by the frequency variations, we can tell where a signal is coming from. So that's the first gradient application. The next, selective excitation, would then apply the excitation pulse, the 90-degree pulse, within a selected slab of the body. So for example, if we are interested in imaging the heart in cardiac MRI, so selective excitation would enable us to selectively excite spins only within the heart so that we can image the heart. Then the next one is phase encoding, which then is a building block of slabs, or if you like, call it slices, like you are slicing the heart into smaller pieces and putting them on each other. So the number of slices that you can put together to create the entire image is what is defined through the phase encoding gradient. So the more slices you have in an image, the better the image quality. So phase encoding defines the number of slabs that are used to create the image. So once all these gradients are turned on in turns during imaging, we are able to, first of all, map frequency to position, selectively say what anatomy we want to image, and finally, the quality of the image we want depending on the phase encoding steps, which on some MRI scanners is defined by the NEX value, number of excitations. So the rest of the slides talk about the, how all these are implemented, starting with the frequency encoding part of it. So you can see here the human body lie in the scanner as though you are looking at the person from the feet facing you. So the body is the middle portion, the arms are to the size of the torso. And so you can see at the bottom here, each of the, let me see if I can get my pointer. So each size of the histogram here maps to the size of the anatomy of interest and position as well. And the frequencies you see here, those to the left are slightly less than the center frequency. That's the way it's supposed to manipulate that. And those above the center frequency to the right are also defined as such. So I'm not going into the details of the way the sequences interact, but just to say that in frequency encoding, we match the position of where the signal is coming from to the anatomy. And then we go to selective excitation, which then would define a slab or a segment inside of the anatomy and excite only that. So we apply a shaped 90-degree radiofrequency pulse to excite spin. So this is where the 90-degree pulse, is clear that it does excitation. So once we excite that, we can then collect signals coming from only that portion of the body. And so, for example, the map you're looking at here is selectively applying the selective excitation pulse within the desired transaxial slice here. So that is what we are interested in imaging. Otherwise, once the human body is inside of the ball, all the spins have the magnetic effect on them until and unless we selectively excite what we want to collect the signal from. All right. So the last step, the phase encoding step, is what then will repeatedly apply a pulse on from bottom up. So if the human being is lying down on the couch, for example, we can assume that the phase encoding step will start, building the anatomy from, let's say, the feet up to the head in that order. So it collects signals in a slice fashion, depending on the number of phase encoding steps or number of citations you select during acquisition. It repeats that a number of times by repeating the entire acquisition pause sequence to build slabs on each other. So the final step, so I'll show the final step, which shows an example of an application of the three gradients. So here you have the three gradients applied in order. The last one here is the phase encoding step. So it starts first with a very huge gradient amplitude, and then varies that as it goes down to the very last end of the slab. And we collect the signals that are built together to create the image we want to see. So here, this is a raw data in case space that are collected in the phase encoding step to build the two-dimensional image we are looking at here after Fourier transformation. So in the case space information, the signals are in the time domain, and we'll do a Fourier transformation of the time domain raw signals into a frequency domain to create the image. And that's a mathematical procedure incorporated into the scanner software to do that. So there are times we may have to do parallel imaging in order to reduce the time taken to acquire an image. So we can do that by changing or reducing the number of phase encoding steps so that we can fasten the process of data collection in case space. I'm not going into the details of all of this for the sake of time. And also when we need to capture images of in real time, where we're looking at functional imaging, like imaging the heart or imaging brain activation during functional MRI, you can also use echoplanar imaging techniques to do that, which enables us to collect signals as we rapidly switch on and off the gradients, whilst applying just one excitation pulse to the anatomy of interest. Now, the next pool, the anatomy of interest in the body is imaged by which of the following gradients? If you want to select an anatomy and say, this is what I want to image, which of these gradients would help us to do that? You can type in your questions, A, B, or C. Wow, brilliant, brilliant.
Yeah.
I'm excited that you're all following. Yes, yes, yes. Perfect, perfect. This is perfect. Yes, you are right.
It's slice selective.
Yes, yes,
Select.
yes, you are right. Slice, we need to do selective excitation, and then we will then say this is what we want to image. That's excellent. Thank you. So the last part, and then we are done, contrast in MRI. Now, contrast allows us to see visibly differences in structure in the anatomy we are looking at. And in MRI, contrast arises mainly from relaxation phenomena. And the two relaxation phenomena of interest are T1 and T2 relaxation. I will discuss that shortly. Then also within the anatomy of interest, to the amount of protons there, that's the hydrogen nuclei that is there, will also give rise to the signal strength. And later I'll mention T2 star. T2 star is where there's a slight change in the homogeneity of the static field strength, maybe due to the presence of an edema or tumor, or or something that is of interest, which is not of normal anatomy, can give rise to T2 star. And so we can manipulate the pulse sequence of interest through the echo time and repetition times to give rise to contrast. I would explain how this is done shortly. So basically, the basic contrast phenomena that you've looked at in the self-paced session included T1, T2 proton density and T2 star weighted images. So we can create T1 weighting when we use a short echo time and a short repetition time. Now, you can all read it, so I'm not going to read that. I'll just go straight to how we do it. So let me go to the next slide. So starting with T1 relaxation. T1 relaxation is called spin lattice. Spin lattice here refers to an interaction between the individual spins, or if you like, the hydrogen nuclei, and the anatomy or the environment in which they are found. So it's a process of losing the spins, losing energy into their surroundings. And so once they lose energy into their surroundings, the signal they give subsequently for MRI will drop. And we call that T1 relaxation time. So that time it takes for that to happen is relaxation, T1 relaxation time. And we often use the inversion recovery technique to measure T1. Note that T1 is short in soft tissues, but long in body fluids because the spins are free to move around in fluids. So it takes a longer time for them to come to quote unquote rest. I've already mentioned how we create T1 contrast using short rep time with short echo time. This is how we do it. So first of all, the total magnetization stands still vertically, and we apply the 180 inversion pulse to it. So once the 180 inversion pulse is applied and we wait a certain time t, what happens is that the M0 relaxes back to the positive y-axis. So if we give it sufficient time to relax, it will go back to its original intensity or length and would have recovered the total magnetization vector again. So what happens in T1 waiting is that you do not wait for the entire duration or period for the M0 to relax back to its original length. You then apply the 90 pulse next to flip it onto the horizontal axis. That's the transverse axis. So once you flip it there, that is when it begins to relax back to the positive y-z axis. And that relaxation process is what leads to the release of the signal. And the signal it releases has an intensity proportional to the length of the recovered M0. And so we would call it T1 weighted. T1 weighted because it is the amount of signal we recover after we have waited for the signal to relax to a certain length. Because we've not recovered everything, then it is said to be weighted by T1. So this is a T1 recovery graph showing different tissue characteristics and their individual intensities in MRI. So for example, if we apply the 90-degree pulse at a certain relaxation level of the M0, tissues that have very long T1s would not have recovered significantly. So this length would define how bright that tissue would be in MRI. Those with medium T1 would have relaxed above the zero axis, and so we recover some small positive signal. And so if you look at this intensity arrow, the long T1 tissue would be the very dark portion, the medium would be the gray portion, and the short means it takes a very short time for the signal to recover to M0 again. So it relaxes back to a very long positive signal, which would be very bright. And so respectively, the short T1 would have a very bright characteristic in the MRI, followed by the medium, and the long will be dark. So let's look at an example of that. So here, because CSF has a long T1, it takes a long time for it to recover after we have applied the inversion pulse. So at 63% of recovery, when we apply the 90-degree pulse to flip M0 onto the horizontal axis, CSF would not have recovered. So it will appear black in T1 or dark in T1, followed by gray matter, which is an intermediate, and in that order to fat. So this is an example of, and to measure T1, you would have to alter the TR value. So if the patient is in the scanner and you keep a constant echo time and you acquire one image, you change the TR, you increase the repetition time, measure another one, repeat the same procedure, increase the TR, you continuously measure. This is the effect you get. So as TR increases with a constant echo time, the image increases in brightness level. Now to T2, which measures the time it takes for the spins to lose their coherence. Coherence means for them to stick together as one M0. The more the spins split, the lesser the signal we would collect at the end of the day. And so in T2 weighting, we are looking at how long it takes for that coherence to be lost amongst the individual spins, which is why it is called spin-spin. So we're looking at spin interactions amongst themselves, losing energy or coherence. This is how we measure that. First of all, we apply a 90-degree pulse to flip the M0 onto the horizontal and wait for some time T. If the tissue has a very short T2, within a very short time, this is what happens. The spins will begin to dephase, to split. And so the more splitting you get, the lesser or weaker the NMR signal you get. Now, if we now want to collect the signal at this stage, we then would apply the 180 inversion. In this case, it's not going to invert, it's going to reverse. We apply it to reverse the split spins. Now, the red spins are moving faster than the blue spins. And so when we flip them, the faster one is now tailing behind the slowly moving spins. So they will catch up with them. And when they catch up with them, we then would collect the signal at that point, which is why it is called an echo. Echo means here we do not collect the signal immediately we apply excitation, but rather we wait until the time when we have done the reversal and we collect the recoherent spins. So we call this a spin echo sequence for that matter. So the more splitting you get, the more the signal will deteriorate here. And that's T2 relaxation effect. And so when we are using T2 in brain imaging, for example, fluids like CSF have long T2. That is, they take a longer time for the individual spins to come to rest. So due to that, when you apply T2 relaxation effect in imaging, fluids would appear brighter because at the time you would have done the collection of the signal, most of the spins in fluids will still be coherent. And the more coherent they are, the brighter the effect in the image. So this is the effect of varying echo times while keeping TR fixed in imaging to measure T2. The last question for the day. I've mentioned two pulse sequences, spin echo and gradient echo. The spin echo is the one I have mentioned that we use that as a series of 90, 180 sequences, pulse sequences. The gradient echo is the one we would have applied 3 gradient pulses together with the 90-degree excitation pulse in imaging. So the question is, the spin echo comprises a single radiofrequency pulse, whereas the gradient echo comprises pairs of RF pulses. Is that statement true or false? You can type your answers. That's very impressive. Very, very impressive. Yes, 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 you are right. So the gradient echo uses only one 90-degree excitation pulse, as we saw in imaging. And the spin echo uses the 90 pulse and then the 180 to flip or reverse before we read out. So the answer is false. So this is the last slide, and then I'm done. So we are all, familiar with MRI. So the main magnet is what is in this building, together with the gradient coils incorporated into that. And so that does the first degree realignment of the spins. And then, for example, if you are doing brain imaging, we use the brain and the head coil. Or if it is cardiac, there are different with the frequency coils for different anatomies. I'm just using this as an example. And whatever we use to control that, I don't have to say it. We are all MRI technologists. You know it more. All right. So the summary is that the basis of NMR theory is the presence of large amounts of hydrogen nuclei in tissue. We align them when we put the patient in the scanner, and we apply an external radiofrequency pulse to perturb their realignment, and their subsequent relaxation leads to the release of the signal we want, which we can then manipulate using gradients to do MRI. And the contrast we see in the image we create can be manipulated through pulse sequence timing parameters, depending on the pulse sequence type we use, which give rise to T1, T2 relaxation effects, manipulated by also the presence of proton density and T2 star effects, which is due to B0 inhomogeneity and T2 relaxation effects. Any advanced MRI technique you come across will use this basic theory. All right, so again, I would like to acknowledge our sponsors and also to thank you for your audience. Thank you. All right, so maybe if there are questions, maybe I could take some questions now. Then the next one will also follow, which is going to be based on what I've just discussed in cardiac imaging, also a short one, and then questions will follow, and then we will break out into the networking session. So feel free if you have questions to ask. If not, as I said, questions can still follow.
Okay, Dr. Nash, can I just I would like you to make a little bit of contribution to the importance of contrast enhancement during cardiac MRI. Yeah, basically, I know there are different stages of development at the moment whereby we don't really need contrast MRI to get some basics or to highlight some lesions during cardiac MRI. But that doesn't rule out the fact that there is this role that contrast plays when we are running cardiac MRI. So just for our participants and just to help clear them the more, I'd like you to tell them the importance of, just highlight again to them the importance of contrast, especially for T1, and then T2, and then if I'm to add again, for some lesions like pericarditis, amyloidosis, even though there are other CMR protocols that doesn't really require contrast, but for these indications that I just mentioned, the importance of contrast cannot be overemphasized. So to this point, there's that role I want you to highlight to them again, because I didn't really get you. The importance of contrast for T1, T2 during post-contrast investigation for cardiac MR. Yeah, thanks.
So if I get you, do you want me to mention the...
No, I just want you to highlight the importance of contrast.
Okay.
T1 contrast for some lesions, most importantly, like amyloidosis and pericarditis during cardiac MRI imaging, and why they shouldn't. I know some patients, when you are scanning some patients, they give you this headache that you might almost want to say you don't want to inject contrast and just run away from it. You understand my point?
Yes,
But
that's
you
right.
should, as a radiographer, find because even there during your day-to-day scanning, some patients might tell you that they don't want to take contrast, which you cannot by force them. And it is now left for you as a radiographer to explain to them the importance of what you're about to do for them, which is the post-contrast phase, especially if the patient comes with indications like or requisition like pericarditis and amyloidosis. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I think that there are other ways I've mentioned that you could manipulate contrast, particularly where there's you think that giving contrast agents could, pose problems. So using just also the protocols that have been optimized, and that's the essence of this training. Once we're able to identify the optimum sequence parameters to use, you can try that first of all on healthy participants or volunteers to see how those parameters would work. But of course, also, before we even start to build or create protocols, you might want to start from phantom studies and then move on to apply on humans. So what I would just say there is that contrast is very relevant where probably giving a contrast agent might be challenging or might not be acceptable to the patient for some reasons, where we might have to, optimize the protocol we have based on the sequence parameters. Currently, we are doing a project like that for brain imaging as a PhD project, where we are not using contrast at all, but just based on sequence parameters we can optimize from phantom studies onto human studies. So we could try something like that. I mean, in short, that's what I would say. Maybe if colleagues also have something to add to that. Hello, Harrison.
Yeah, thank you. You did justice to that. I really appreciate that you could highlight the fact that we shouldn't run, because of course some patients might come in and then they want to run away from contrast. We shouldn't run away from it. If we know the importance of contrast, depending on the indication that the patient comes in with, it is embedded or left for the radiographer to be able to explain to the patient that what I want to do might most likely be useless if I don't give contrast, and then be able to convince the patient, most importantly. Yeah, thank you.
Nash, there's a hand raised.
Okay, I've not seen that.
Hello.
Yet. Yes, please go ahead, please.
Okay. Sorry. I didn't know we started. Did we have the cardiac class done? As in, sorry, I wasn't to. And as well, I want to ask. The pulse sequence in MRI. It's called a pulse sequence. It implies that certain events, event occurs, which has a beginning and the end as well. So I don't know how the gradients come in, why the flip and why the frequency has an excitation at what point in the time during the at what is it when does phase encoding, frequency encoding, slight selective gradient, the 90 degrees, and probably in spin echo 180 degrees at in the sequence time are they applied brain imaging. And I have one issue with from my hand, I have one issue with my cardiac MRI, this thing, my TI scouts. Usually when out comes out, and I select the time of inversion, that's for the, if I put it into my, that's my PSR, into my late gadolinium enhancement for short axis and the 4 chambers and 2 chambers, I don't know, it gives me something different from what I saw on my this. So I don't know, maybe if it is my parameter that I didn't check well or I didn't set them well. It has not been like that, but suddenly it just started changing like that.
Sorry, before you go ahead, let's just do the physics question first, and then we can get to the scout questions for time.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. So go ahead, Nash. So Nash can figure out.
Yeah. So you asked about when do these three gradients apply?
Yes, during the post sequence.
Yeah. So in order, what happens is that the moment you start running the sequence, whatever sequence it is that you are using to image, the very first one would come on. That is going to be the frequency encoding. That is what tells the scanner where to collect signals from. So that's the first one that would come. And I've given a summary diagram of the three sequences at the end of the MRI basics portion. So the frequency encoding would come first. And then the next is then the selective excitation, which would then tell the scanner which anatomy of interest you are trying to image, and then excites the spins only within that portion. So when the scanner starts when the sequence starts running, the frequency encoding section does not give you the final image yet. Then once activation starts, if you were to look at the case space in real time, you will not see anything happening yet until the last gradient starts working, which is the phase encoding. You then will begin to see lines of data building up. So they follow in that sequence. The frequency encoding comes first, followed by selective excitation, and then the phase follows as the last one. So that you can then build the image in case space in the raw data format. I don't know whether I have explained that clearly.
Okay, so yeah, thanks for the explanation.
Yes. So that's what I explained as in the theory I gave. Yeah, there's some text I'm seeing.
Okay, I'd like to chip in a little bit of for the second question that has to do with TI Scout, if you permit. And then anybody that has any other stuff can add. Am I free to go?
Yes, go ahead, Harrison.
Okay, fine. For the TI Scout, I understand that before you run your short axis post contrast, you should be able to select an appropriate TI Scout for your scan. And then there are some one or two things that affect this and gives you a wrong answer because you are trying to locate the myocardium that is darkest during your investigation. And if you are not very observant and you select a wrong myocardium, you might not be able to get a good post-contrast short axis scan. You get a wrong information. And I think I used to make that mistake before. Before you actually select the myocardium that is darkest, you should be able to highlight if there is artifacts that might mimic the darkest myocardium during your scan, because you have to scroll through your TI Scout, check to be very sure that there is no artifact mimicking darkest myocardium during your scan. And then one other thing that you need to check out is to look through your scanner to be very sure you are not selecting a number that is below average or above average. And what I mean is, I know in Africa, what we do sometimes, we select something like 200, 250 for the TI Scout, which, and then we assume that it is the darkest myocardium. But when I did some little bit of research on this recently, I realized that I'm selecting a very wrong TI Scout number and using it to run my short axis scan. So I would want you to go back, check very well before you finally select, to be very sure that you are selecting the darkest myocardium. And if you are not selecting the darkest myocardium, adjust your protocols when you are running the TI Scout to give you an image that is not mimicking any artifact, and that will help you to select the right myocardium, which you might most likely use to plan your short axis scan during the TI, during the post-contrast phase. I don't know if I could help, if I helped any way in that instant, Wally. Wally, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. So please contact you personally, sir, because there are some things there. I don't know if the IR pump, the inversion pulse, if it is like selective or selective, because there's a space short. So I checked the myocardium, that's the darkest part with the whitest blood. It still gives me everything comes out very dark. So though my doctor said it's okay, but I feel it should not be.
If it is too dark, you might be losing out some lesions like fibrosis, because at that point you might not know when the myocardiums are releasing the contrast after accepting it. So I think you should go back to your protocol and be very sure that you are giving the right amount of contrast. You are setting the right amount of protocol that is not casting any artifact during your selection of the TI number for your mid short axis. Do you understand? So I think you should check your protocol very well to be very sure.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you, sir.
Before you actually select, like I did state, you need to scroll through to be very sure that there is no artifacts in the mid short axis, because I know you are planning with your mid short axis. You are not, there's no artifact, and I think one of the process during this training is they're going to train you on how to identify artifact during cardiac MRI. So if you are able to select sort out artifact, and then your protocols are right, and then the volume of contrast you use also is right, so then you are good to go.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Can I also throw some light on that?
Perfect.
Okay, you can.
Yeah, so when it comes to the phase encoding, the frequency encoding gradient, I think they helped in the spatial resolution and where to locate the signal. Because when you take the whole volume, how are you sure that it's coming from this particular part of the body? So the phase encoding, frequency encoding, and all those gradients helps in filling out the K-space, so that during computation, the computer is able to tell that this particular signal is coming from this particular part of the body. I hope that will help to your question.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. There was a hand raised by Alexander.
Yes, please go ahead.
Hello, and it was a form question. Do we need to do in the hands-on last part of the course when we are going to practice with a healthy volunteer? Do we need to use contrast with the person?
No, no contrast. Because we'll be doing the oxygen O2 sensitive technique, which doesn't require contrast, right? So that's the idea. I'm sorry, my camera is not on. Hold on, let me fix it so it won't look right. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. So we'll be doing it without contrast.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Abdul, thank you for the presentation. Thank you very much, and greetings from Costa Rica.
Thank you.
Nice to see you, Alexander.
I think if we are done with this one, can we have the next one follow? If we've exhausted all the questions now. But of course, we can exhaust them. If there are still questions, you can feel free to send them by email or through your team supervisors. For the sake of time, we can move to the next one. So Francis, if you are ready, let me stop sharing.
Yeah, just a moment. I hope you all found the materials for the first week very useful. This is just a summary of what you've gone through the past week. And thanks to Dr. Nash for that elaborated physics part. So I'm going to walk you through the CMR sequences and how to reduce artifacts on the cardiac imaging, cardiac anatomy and physiology, then MRI safety in the cardiac imaging. Yeah, we can move on. Yeah, so when we come to cardiac imaging, there are basically two pulse sequences that we normally use. And these are the black blood techniques, which are normally spin echo pulse sequences. Then we have the bright blood techniques. And these are normally gradient echo pulse sequences. Yeah, you can move on. Good. So these are some of the cardiac images that I have here. So you can see that image 1 and 2, the blood looks dark or black, which means it was acquired by using spin echo sequences. Whilst image 3, you can see that the blood looks bright, which means it was was acquired by using the gradient echo sequence. So one will ask, what's the difference between the spin echo and gradient echo? So as Dr. Nash was explaining in the basic MRI physics, spin echo normally uses a 90-degree excitation pulse and a 180-degree refocusing pulses, whilst gradient echoes normally use a low flip angles and gradient pulses. There is no 180-degree refocusing pulse in gradient echo sequences. So you can use that to differentiate if you're having challenges or difficulties in noticing which sequence that you are using. We can move on. What are some of the advantages of spin echo pulse sequences? It's robust to susceptibility artifact and flexible to obtain different contrasts using various time to echo and repetition times. Some of the disadvantages are it has long acquisition time, especially the conventional spin echoes, and it has a limited temporal resolution. The temporal resolution is the number of time you acquire the images, when you acquire the images, and it's sensitive to motion and flow. And this explains why normally in cine images, we use gradient echo sequences because the blood is moving and this type of sequence is not good. You're going to have a lot of artifacts as some people have started encountering them in their department. Can we move on? Okay, so these are some of the examples of spin echo pulse sequences. We have fast spin echo, half acquisition, single shot, turbo spin echo, single shot, turbo spin echo, turbo spin echo, and single shot, fast spin echo. Normally, these nomenclatures depends on the type of scanner that you're using. various vendors uses different nomenclature, especially HIST is normally for Siemens, and Philips, I think they use single shot turbo spin echo. So it depends on which brand of scanner that you are using. Normally, they all perform the same functions. Can we move on? Thank you. So let's look at inversion recovery pulse sequence. This is the type of spin echo pulse sequence, and are used to narrow the signal from desired tissue to highlight the surrounding pathologies. So what this means is we want to suppress some part of the cardiac, the heart, so that we give more emphasis to some particular parts. So as you can see on the image, here we try to suppress the signal from myocardium so that if there's any other signal coming out of the myocardium, then you may conclude that it's not a myocardium, it could be an edema or other pathology. So this is one example of how useful the inversion recovery pulses are. Yeah, we can move on. All right, so as you can see on the diagram, let me throw more light on how the inversion recovery comes about. So you can see on diagram A that fat on the longitudinal magnetization axis is on the 0 after inverting, after using the 180-degree inverting pulse. The signal or the pulses recover gradually, and it gets to a point which we call null point at 0, where you cannot have any signal coming from that part. And at that point, that particular tissue will look dark because there's no signal coming out from that. And this depends mainly on the time of inversion. So each tissue has different inversion time. And you can see that fat has a short inversion time. Fluid has a long inversion time. And blood has an intermediate inversion time. So this variation in the inversion time and the null point will help us if we want to suppress a particular tissue. We will just put that particular inversion time in our parameters, and we can scan and try and suppress that part. Yeah, we can move on. So let's look at some types of inversion recovery or techniques. We have a double inversion recovery and triple inversion recovery techniques that we normally exploit or employ in the cardiac imaging. So the double inversion technique uses 2 RF inversion pulses close to each other after the ECG triggering to produce dark blood. So we are going to use 2 RF inversion pulses. Thus, you excite or invert, sorry.
Sorry, that was me. I'm working on a different computer.
All right. Cool.
Sorry, trying to work and do this. Okay, go ahead.
All right. So the double inversion technique, we apply 2 RF inversion pulses just to narrow the signal that's coming out from blood. And when we use the triple inversion technique, which means that we are going to suppress two tissue characterization, like fat and blood. So we are going to feed our computer or the parameters with two inversion recovery inversion times, which will suppress fat and at the same time suppress blood. So a triple inversion recovery can thus be taught as a double inversion recovery plus a stir. We all know from our basic MRI physics that stir, that's a short inversion recovery. It's used to narrow signal from fat. So if you are doing any examination and you see the stir, that means you want to suppress the signal that's coming out from fat. And we know that the double inversion technique, we use that one to suppress signal from blood. So if I'm going to add another inversion recovery that will suppress fat, that means I'm using triple inversion recovery technique. Yeah, we can move on. So as you can see from this diagram, we are using the triple inversion recovery to suppress signal that's coming out from fat and blood. And this is the end result on the image. So you can see that the blood is dark and fat around that is also dark. So any signal that's coming out of, from the myocardium could not be fat. It could be like myocardial edema or any other pathology, but you cannot see that it's fat. And how do you, we can move back. Sorry. How do we get our inversion times for the various tissues? We have a formula down here, which you can use to calculate the inversion time. The inversion time is equivalent to 0.69 by the time, the realization time, T1. So if you know your T1 of fat, you can easily calculate the inversion time for fat, at which around that longitudinal magnetization, fat will look dark. And the same thing applies to blood, muscles, and fluid. We'll move on. All right, so we can look at these two images. The one on my left hand side, they use the double inversion recovery. And you can see that blood in this looks dark, and around the area of interest, you can see that fat looks bright. So, which means that it's just double inversion recovery. And on my right side, you can see that fat looks dark, and at the same time, blood also looks dark, which means that they also use the triple inversion recovery technique to acquire this image. We can move. Thank you. So let's look at the other family of pulse sequences, which is a gradient echo. Why do we normally use gradient echoes? This is the faster image acquisition time than spin echo sequences. So this is the main reason why we normally use gradient echo sequences in our functional MRI, where we want to acquire the images within a very short time, you want to acquire multiple images so that you can use that to analyze your brain activities. But even though this gradient echo is good, it also has its own pitfall, disadvantage. It's very low, it has very low ratio. Or this, if you use these sequences, most of the images, you cannot use it to diagnose, like functional MRI. You can use it to monitor the activities that happens in the brain, but it's not useful for diagnostic purposes because the signal to noise ratio is very low that you cannot have a very good resolution to conclude that if there's a pathology there, you are very sure that that's that pathology. These are some of the examples of gradient echoes. We have spoiled gradient echo and a balanced steady state free precession. And these kind of gradient echoes are used mostly for cardiac examinations. Spoiled gradient remove the residual transverse magnetization at the end of the repetition time. And one advantage is because of the fast acquisition of T1 images after contrast injection. And as you already know, saturation of signal when the TR is short or flow is very slow. So that one difference between the spoiled gradient echo and the balanced steady state free precession is the balanced steady state free precession refocuses and reuse the remaining transverse magnetization at the end of the TR, whilst the spoiled gradient doesn't use the or refocuses the remaining transverse magnetization at the end of the TR. And these are the advantages of the balanced steady state free precession. The signal strength mostly unaffected by blood flow and has rapid image acquisition with high contrast to noise ratio. Some of the examples are listed below. And as I said, some of these are just nomenclatures based on the vendors. Let's look at cine imaging. Cine imaging are short videos that show cardiac motions throughout the heart cycles. And I've mentioned it already that because of the movement of blood, we use gradient echoes in acquiring that images. Because if you rely on spin echo, it's going to give you a lot of artifacts. Images are acquired by the help of ECG gating techniques to reduce motion artifacts from the heart and a breath hold exercise to eliminate respiratory movement. So one difficulty in cardiac imaging, as we all know, it's movement of the heart and respiratory motions. And how are you going to all right, so one purpose of using the cine imaging is to assess the cardiac wall motion. On the next slide, All right, so this is the video of the cine imaging, and which shows the movement of the myocardium. Wish I could play that.
I don't think it's gonna
Click-
play.
you
I
click
think it's on
on it?
your. Yeah,
If you
I
click
think it's
on
on
it-
your computer, so I don't think it's gonna play.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
The video is linked to your something's shared on your computer.
All right, cool.
Yeah,
not
so that's
happening.
fine.
So this is a video that I posted just to help emphasize on the ECG, on the cine imaging. So when you play it, you can see the movement of blood and the movement of a myocardium. And if there's any pathology in the myocardium, you'll be able to see it. And you will see all the movements of the valves within the heart. So you can easily tell if there's a pathology or not. We can move to the next one.
Francis, that's what you wanted to show.
Yeah, thank
Healthy.
you.
Okay. I just found something on YouTube quickly, so I didn't think it was only 8 seconds. I don't know if they cut that. Okay.
All right, so let's move on to gating. As I said, cardiorespiratory movement are the main artifacts that we are very concerned of. So once you are able to regulate the movement of the heart or the respiratory movement, you are going to get the quality of the images will be very good. So let's look at some of the techniques that we normally use so that to reduce the motion artifacts in cardiac imaging. And one of them is ECG gating. So we are trying to synchronize the MRI data acquisition with the signals from ECG so that we try and acquire images at a particular times within the heartbeat. So when you talk about the ECG gating, we have two types. We have the prospective gating or triggering. Then we have a retrospective gating. So the prospective gating, we are looking at acquiring the MRI data at a certain part of the heartbeat. And for retrospective gating, we take the data from the entire RR interval. And after that, we can reorder or regroup them and select through the phases that we want. So this was what I was talking about on the other slide. You can see that there is an acquisition window here. And this is where we want to acquire our images. The trigger delay here, we don't want the turbulence that happens here. That's the P wave and the QRS complex and the T wave. Because if we acquire data from this side, it might cause artifacts, and we don't want that. So we want to acquire the data where it is at the diastolic zone, where the heartbeat is very quiet. And by employing the prospective gating technique, we'll be able to acquire data just within the acquisition window. So how, now we can go back. Thank you. How are we able to get our TR? so that we know that we are going to acquire the data just at the acquisition zone, acquisition window. So the repetition time, we can still go back, is the R interval. So once we know that the trigger delay is just between 0 to 50 milliseconds. So if we are able to calculate our TR, we can subtract that, and we know that that's the systolic zone. So once we are able to feed our computer with a trigger delay and the correct TR, we should be able to acquire our images just around the acquisition window. So this diagram shows the difference between prospective gating and retrospective gating. So for the prospective gating, you can see that data is just acquired within the acquisition window, whilst the retrospective gating, we are going to acquire data for the entire height bit from the RR interval. Then after that, the machine will be able to select a particular segment that it's good for the images. So most of our cine images rely on retrospective gating because we are going to get enough information, and the computer is going to help us to analyze that this is the zone that we want. So it's going to put them into phases or segments, and based on that, it will reconstruct the images.
Okay, so Francis, we are kind of running short of time, so I think we may have to speed up for the rest of them.
Yeah, thank you. So these images, I'm just going to compare how the image is going to look like if we are not using any cardiac or respiratory gating. So the first image is without, so you can see how poor the quality is. The second image is using just only cardiac gating. The third one is just respiratory gating. And when you use both technique, you can see how improve our images. We can move on. Let's look at some of the capabilities of our cardiac MRI. So we can use cardiac imaging to assess the structural changes of the heart. And this one, we normally use spin echo pulse sequences. For functional assessment of the heart, we normally use gradient echo pulse sequences. And if you are going to look at myocardial viability or changes, we normally give gadolinium enhanced on T1 weighted images, and we employ inversion prepared fast gradient echo sequences to achieve this. Let's look at the cardiac anatomy and physiology. So to be able to scan the heart to get the quality heart images, you should be very good at your cardiac anatomy. You should be able to tell all the 4 chambers of the heart, the left and the right atrium, the left and the right ventricles, your myocardium, and the bicuspid and the tricuspid valve, and the function of each of them. And you should be able to tell, or should be able to understand the conduction of the heart, the importance of the sinoatrial node. You should be able to know that the natural pacemaker of the heart, that starts the heartbeat, that's the sinoatrial node. And from there, it moves or relay the impulse, the electrical impulses to the atrioventricular node. Then from there, the bundle of His picks it and move it to the Purkinje fibers. So you should be able to know the steps and how the blood is able to flow through the heart. Should be able to know the coronary arteries and all those parts of the heart, and what happens if there's any abnormality of each of these parts. So this is a diagram to show how the conduction is taking place. So it started in the atrium from the sinoatrial node. And this is the P wave is our atrial systole. Then the QR complex is our ventricular systole, and the T wave, as we all know, is our ventricular diastole. And these waveforms are our ECGs. If there's any arrhythmia, you can see some disturbances in the forms of the waves. And yeah, that diagram shows that. Let's go to safety in our MRI imaging. And for this instance, cardiac imaging. What are some of the safety hazards that one can encounter in the MRI department? So we have 3 primary safety hazards to humans in the MRI. The static magnetic field, which is normally produced by the strong magnets, has a projectile effect, which means if there's any ferromagnetic substance and you bring that into the room, it can cause injuries or even result in death if there's to anybody in the room. We also have the gradient magnetic field, which is produced by the gradient coils. And these gradient magnetic field also gives electrical current. So if you put somebody in the scanner and there is a metal, it might conduct some of these electrical current that is being produced by the gradient coil, and it can shock the patient. We also have the radio frequency radiation produced by the radio frequency coil, pulses, and this can produce a lot of heat. So it can also cause skin burns if proper insulation is not adhered to. That's why when you put a patient in the scanner, you should be able to insulate the patient. Don't allow the patient's skin to touch the gantry, which can result in skin burns. Let's look at CMR in pregnancy. Is it safe to scan a pregnant woman? There are a lot of literature out there that suggests that it is safe to scan a pregnant woman. And before you do that, precautionary measures should be undertaken. You have to weigh the benefits to see whether it's very urgent for you to go ahead with the scan or not. At least for the first trimester, because of these radiant pulses and some of these examination might, even though it's cardiac imaging, there are a lot of improvement where we are not going to use contrast agents and other stuff. But if there is a need to use the contrast agents, what are the precautionary measures and what is the effect of that? Some school of thought thinks that once you give the contrast agent to the mother, there's a possibility that it might be transferred to the fetus. And what are some of the dangers in that? Research is still at the early stage on that. But for now, they think it's safe to scan a pregnant woman. So let's look at safety measures in our MRI environment. I think each department should have a standard safety screening policies, and this must be implemented because of the dangers in the magnetic field. We all saw that some of the dangers that we can encounter in there. There should be a thorough screening form in the form of questionnaire, and this must be filled and signed by both patient and the radiographer. When you're going to use ECG electrodes, is it classified as MRI safe to be used in the scanner room? Most of the vendors, they give out a lot of manuals, so you are very sure that this particular electrode can be used in your MRI environment. And if you are not sure, you just have to refer to the manuals to be ascertained. If not, you're going to cause a lot of problems. And do not use conventional ECG LEDs for CMR exams because of the conduction activity of these LEDs. It can conduct the electrical current in the machines, which can cause problems. Then keep ECG leads as short as possible. If there's any loop, you have to unloop them. And recent scanners have wireless ECG leads, which you can rely on. Also, I recommend this website for anyone. In case you're going to scan a patient and you're not sure, not all metallic implants are MRI compatible. If you're not sure, you can go to www.mrisafety.com. There are a whole list of items there which has been researched to be sure it's okay to go ahead with the scan and has been categorized into MRI safe, MRI conditional, and even the type of scanner that you're using, the strength, if it's 1.5 Tesla or 3.5 Tesla. Some of them may be okay with the 1.5 Tesla because the strength is not that high. If you are using the 3.0 Tesla, it might not be okay because the strength is high. So you can just go in there and search the type of substance or implant, and they'll be able to tell you whether it's safe to scan in that or not. Then we can move on. Yeah, so this is the end. Thank you very much. And I hope this is going to help you.
Is there any questions for Francis?
If you have any question here, you can ask, and I'm ready to help if I have the answer here. If not, the chat is always available. You can put it on, and I'll be able to help you out.
Okay. Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Anthony.
Okay. There's a lovely lecture, and I really love it. But when you were talking about the IR version recovery, the double and the triple, yes, I get the terms, the application, but I really appreciate the physics. I just need you to throw more light on that. Yeah, so that I can understand. Because if you understand the physics a little bit more, the better you practice.
Yeah, so thank you. So the physics behind the double or the inversion recovery pulses is that we are trying to null the signal that is coming out from a particular part of the body. So we know that our RF excitation pulse normally is 90 degrees. And when you apply a 180 degrees, you are going to invert that pulse. So the 180 degrees pulse inversion will, when we apply that, we allow the signal with time is going to recover to the longitudinal magnetization zone. And as it's moving, it gets to a point which we call the null point. And at that point, there's no signal that will come out from that particular tissue. And the inversion time for that particular point is noted so that you are sure that for this particular tissue, like fat, its inversion time is maybe 170 milliseconds. So at that point, there won't be any signal on the transverse magnetization. Okay, so at that point, because you are not going to get any signal coming from that particular tissue will be suppressed and it will look dark because there's no signal that's coming out from that particular tissue. So if you are going to do that for CSF like this, the flare sequence that you normally use in your brain imaging, we've inputted the inversion time for CSF into our computer. So whenever it gets there, all the CSF, there's no signal that will come out from that zone and it will look dark. We can do same for the white matter, and the white matter will look dark. So if you image your brain and we have that inversion time inserted in our parameters or in the protocol, white matter is going to look dark, and any signal that is coming out from that zone will then be regarded as not the white matter, but different pathology or abnormality that is coming out from that. So you can see that there is a lot of, when you do your, the T2 star on the brain, the white matter will look dark and the CSF will also look dark. So if you are going to, like for the dementia patient, we normally want to see if there's any degenerative changes in the brain. And around the white matter, you see a lot of white signal that's coming out from that zone, which means that those particular areas within the white matter, there's a pathology around that, because all the white matters will turn dark and we are not expecting signals to come out from that particular zone. So this is just the physics behind that. I hope this helps you to understand that.
It helps me to understand, but I'm relating it to the third inversion. Like if you have done the second, the double inversion recovery, then the third one,
The triple inversion recovery.
Yeah, the triple.
Yeah, so the double inversion recovery, the idea is to help to suppress signals that are coming out from blood. So we know that one already. And we are going to add another technique so that we also suppress signals that are coming out from fat. The main reason why we normally use our STAIR protocol sequence is to suppress signals from fat. So if you're doing an MSK and you use STAIR on a particular part of the body, you're trying to suppress all fat around that part. So fat will turn dark, and any signal or brightness in that area will not be regarded as fat. So we are going to add that idea to the double inversion recovery. But we know that our double inversion recovery, we've suppressed blood signal already. So if we add the fat suppression, then we are going to suppress blood and fat. So any other signal that is coming out, we know that it's not coming from blood and it's not coming from fat. So it might be coming from different source, which we have to find out whether it's a pathology or not.
Okay. I get it now.
Thank you.
Okay, we could take 2 more questions and then we probably have to move on to the networking. There's one from Tin in the chat, and I'm probably mispronouncing your name, I apologize. Can you explain what trigger window is? And then Norbert has his hand up.
Okay. Hello, this is Norbert.
I thought Norbert has already asked.
No.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
so the trigger window,
thank you.
it's the turbulence section of our ECG wave. So when you see the P wave, you can see that the P wave is the atrial systole. So there's a bit of curve, or it's the waveform. And when you go to the QRS complex, that's where a lot of turbulence happens, because you are in the ventricular systole zone, what do you call it? Systole zone. And the T wave is the ventricular diastole zone. So around that particular zone, there's a lot of waveforms that's happen around that zone. And this particular zone is what we term the trigger window.
Okay, and then Norbert?
Okay, so thank you very much. So we know some heart conditions can result in arrhythmia. I want to ask, what is the highest heart rate any cardiac MRI system can accommodate? Thank you.
The highest heart rate. I know that for our normal heart rate, I mean, the heartbeat is like between 60 to 100 beats per minute. So if there's any changes, whether the heart is beating very slow or very fast within 1 minute, I don't have the accurate, I mean, what do you call it? Beats per minute for that. When it's raised beyond the 60 to 100 beats per minute, which means our heart is not beating normal. So there will be a changes in the waveform, and that's what we call the arrhythmia. It means the rhythmic beating has changed. Either it's going too fast or very slow. Yeah, but I don't have the ranges of head. Maybe I have to refer to my literature and I can help you with that.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Christian wants to contribute to what Francis has said.
I typed it in. I started in. But someone is asking a question about whether the recording will be available.
Yes, the recording will be available. It's going to be posted on 4Waves. It will be available on, we'll say by Monday. So just give us time to compress and put it in. So every time we have a event, it will give us about 24 hours or so. If you go back to that event, it will say on demand. That's how you access the content after it's been, after the date has passed. Okay. So follow the same thing as we did with the Siemens. Go back to the course material, click on demand, and you get it. So this will be, you will get the recording.
Thank you.
Okay, I think, did we have, Francis wanted to make a comment. Sorry, not Francis. Christian wants to make a comment to the question about the slew rate. So Christian, you can go ahead and do that. So we can then jump onto the networking session and because we're running out of time. Thank you.
Yeah, Christian, you can come in.
Hello. Hello, how are you? My name is Christian Montalban from Santiago de Chile. I'm a radiographer. I work in research, but also I am part of this amazing teamwork of the SWiM program. I'm from the LATAM division. So yeah, complementing the answer from Francis, the scanner, it depends of the slew rate principally, because normally the normal you have different kind of scanners, when you buy one scanner. You have, I don't know, for instance, one slew rate, because if you have more slew rate, you're gonna have more, the gradient's going to be more faster. In terms of production, it's going to it's going to have a benefit if you perform, for example, diffusion images, or also in cardiac MRI. Why is cardiac MRI? Because if the patient have arrhythmia, it will change it a lot of times. So the scanner, it cannot be degrading so fast to capture the whole cardiac movement. So if you have a specially dedicated cardiac scanner, if you have a more slew rate, and it's also very expensive from the scanner, you could have more changes in the arrhythmia. Yeah. But if it changes a lot in a normal scanner, all the sequences, if you do it retrospectively, is going to cut down and you cannot acquire. So the answer is depend of the slew rate. And also the trigger of the window, because normally for cardiac protocols, you only have like a 10% of the cardiac, 10% plus and 10% minus of the heart rate. For instance, is it 60 seconds heartbeat per minute? It's going to be 70 or 50. But if you have a less window, it's better, because your heartbeat is more like standard in the whole of the images, But it changed a lot, and your window is too big. It's like is not you're going to your all of your CME images or your cardiac images, they're going to be like normally like a cine movie, So everything depends. But in terms of if you have a patient with a lot of arrhythmia, I recommend you to evaluate with the cardiologist and previously have something like a beta blocker, and because it's going to be reduce the cardiac arrhythmia.
Excellent. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, Christian.
Okay, Alexander has a question. I think that will be it.
I was to say almost the same thing that Christian talked, because we also do CT scan for cardiac imaging, and a game changer is the beta blockers. If you give, or the cardiologist prescribe 3 days before the exam beta blockers, the patient comes with a exact rhythm in the cardiac cycle, and is sinusal. So it might be stable and not with arrhythmias, and with the velocity very prepared for the scanning. So it's a game changer. So sometimes we can go and talk with the doctors or the physicians and place the prescription, because the patient needs to come without coffee in the morning at least, or beta blockers. So it's a great comment. Thank you, Christian.
I would like to comment, Alexander. For instance, it's not the area, but in the scanner, if you have the same problem, if you have a scanner with more detectors, you can acquire more images, even if the patient will have a arrhythmia. So it's the same in MRI. If you can capture more faster the heartbeat, you can acquire more better images in cardiac imaging. But like Alexander said, it's beta blocker. It's the easiest and affordable way to for the challenge of the arrhythmia.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fantastic. So I think I see Adewale has a question, and I'm not sure if that's the same hand up or a new hand. So I just want to make that quick, and then we'll have to move on. Adewale, if you can make a question very short and very quick, we'll be able to take it.
Mhm.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks so much for the opportunity. Arrhythmia is tachycardia and different from bradycardia. Arrhythmia implies irregular heartbeat. So I think that's what the person is asking. Though on my machine, I think there is a do arrhythmia, but I don't know. But tachycardia, that means the heart rate is very high, so it depends on the slew rate as well. But I don't. So I don't know if another person of if they have another way of adjusting their to be a patient image for patients with arrhythmia irregular. Maybe probably in one at a particular point in the cardiac circuit, maybe it's 70, then over 1 minute it goes to 120, then comes back to 40 and the likes. So I think that's what the question is about. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I don't understand your question. Could you write it, please?
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
sorry.
What I said is this. I mean, what the question was. The question was for arrhythmia, not tachycardia or arrhythmia implies the heart rate is not stable. It's from
Adewale,
low
are
to
you
very high.
asking questions? Sorry to interrupt. Are you asking question about being able to figure out the trigger window? I think you're saying that Train's question is a trigger window in a condition where you have arrhythmia, where the heart rate bounces up and down from say 60 to 120. How do you figure out the trigger window?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
That's the question?
Yeah,
Yes,
that's the question.
Yeah. So the window, it's of course it's if you have less, it's better. It's in terms of it's like 10% of the heartbeat, or 10 plus or 10 minus. If you have 60, normally it could be 70 or 50 or at least 10%. Like if it's 60, it could be 66 or 70, 57, 58. Yeah, but everything, it depends. Normally when you acquire your cine images, it's all set. Normally you can it's normally when you're in your facility, you planify the whole protocol. Normally that kind of parameters, you don't change it so many times. You only change only once, but it's normally it's 10%.
Okay, so I'm not sure. I think the question was, how do you set your R to R when you have a heart rate that bounces up and down? So I'm a neuro person. I do brain imaging. I haven't done cardiac in a long time. I'm trying to remember what we do when we do PET imaging, and we do ECG gating in PET. But in PET, we're able to reject heart rates that are desynchronous. We do this desynchronous rejection. But I'm not sure if we could do that in MR with the temporal resolution of MR. In PET or in SPECT, we tend to disregard and collect more data. So
yeah,
I'm not sure what
I think I got the question. The thing is, if you have short window, is like because one thing is the temporal resolution, and the other thing is the acceptance of the difference of the RR. So yeah, if you have you are more strict. You have less threshold. So what do you accept? And of course, you have a better resolution. Yeah, of course, you will more reject, as you said in your question, you will reject more images, and it's of course going to be long time. And also you need to be aware, especially if some images are in with breath hold, you know. So yeah, that's the challenge between changing the Windows trigger acceptance and also with the game with the temporal resolution. Normally, like I said, a temporal resolution in cardiac imaging could be like 20 milliseconds, 30 milliseconds. You know, it depends of the sequence normally, and it's like of a trigger acceptance in retrospective is like 10% of the heart rate.
Okay, I think Harrison wants to add something to this, and then we'll move on.
Okay, let me just some high-end MRI now comes with what they call peripheral gating. That peripheral gating allows you to attend to patients that have irregular heart rates, and also allows you to attend to patients that have high heart rates. So it depends also on the system you are using. If your system, like also what Francis explained earlier, that there are two types of gating, the retrospective and the prospective. One of the gating allows you to acquire images, free breathing method, during your scanning protocols without disturbing the patient to either breathe in or breathe out. And then the system will go back itself and select the one that gives the best imaging. So to solve your issue of maybe you're having an irregular heart rate or high heart rate, if your system has peripheral gating, you can just switch from the normal vector gating that you know, which is the ECG gating, and just go to peripheral gating, which will allow you to attend to this patient freely. Or you can activate the free breathing gating in your system, activate the free breathing in your system, and then run your scan. I don't really know much about the physics behind it, but I know there are two things I could do. I could just switch to peripheral gating from the vector gating, or I activate free breathing on the MRI system. Fine, and then I go my way.
Yeah, I think the free breathing and this just came up. Yeah, it does probably use spherical navigators. So this 2D or 3D, I think most of them are 3D now. 3D navigators that are able to track motion. They're very short, almost FID-like pulses that are sort of it is set at the beginning of the sequence to sort of track motion over time, and then you can use that to retrospectively. Although there are prospective navigated sequences to retrospectively correct for motion, and I'm seeing some of this in cardiac MRI. I mean, we do this in we did this in brain MRI, but I'm sure that they're doing that in cardiac MRI now. Okay, I think we have to move on for time. First, I do want to introduce myself to the group. My name is Dr. Yudan Anazodo. I am an imaging, yes, a neuroimaging physicist at the Montreal Neurological Institute at McGill. My main research focus is on neuro, as you heard. I do PET and MRI brain imaging. I was trained on a hybrid, so a system that has both PET and MRI combined. And my lab develops methods, both PET and MRI methods, for being able to use non-contrast. So we do things like atterospin labeling. We try to use atterospin labeling as a non-contrast agent to do both brain blood flow imaging, but also to do other things like vascular reactivity, blood-brain barrier dysfunction, look at transit time, all that stuff. And on the PET side, we develop a lot of PET tracers and use that to provide complementary neuroimaging. I'm also the chair of CAMERA, which some of you may have seen in the email. This is a network of MRI experts and users across the world, like Christian, Harrison, Francis, people like that are coming together to help us create an ecosystem that will allow us to upscale the MR expertise that we have in LMICs, focused most in Africa, but doing work now in Latin America and Southeast Asia that will provide an opportunity for people to gain skills they need to improve the imaging practices in these countries. And this is one of the programs that we're running. The Scan With Me program is run by Christian, Harrison, Francis, Shirin, and Dr. Nash. And we're very happy to kick this off today. I'm sure you've gone through the welcome package. We will emphasize that you sort of read that to bring you up to speed. We're trying to make this program as hands-on as possible, as practical as possible. We'll be introducing later on in the coming weeks a sequence simulator where you guys can actually simulate MR sequences using cases, look at the images, play around with the contrast, and essentially be able to even analyze the images. So we're working, not working, we have licenses for you guys to also practice image processing. During the program, you're going to have seminars from cardiologists, from MR physicists, seminars from software companies that do image analysis. We encourage you to participate as much as you can. You have to give to get something out of this. So we're giving you our time. All of us are doing this on our own time. None of us are getting paid for this at all. This is a gift of love, and so we will encourage you to take advantage of that and show up and participate, because that's how you get the best out of this particular program. I'm gonna turn it over to Christian, I think, and I don't know who else needs to introduce himself. I believe Harrison, not Harrison, Surin as well. And then we'll just do a quick networking session. The networking sessions are very important to us because we want you guys to actually create your own user forum. If you sort of pay attention a little bit to what's going on, you recognize that, at least for most of you guys in Africa, you don't have a direct relationship with the vendors, right? You have to go through a middleman. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to bring the vendor to you, like we did with Siemens. But we also want you guys to create your own user forum. See, if you look at the questions that were asked today, some of you already kind of have the experience in it. We want to get you guys to start working together, sharing your own experiences, answering your own questions. So these networking sessions we're going to create now on the weekends and during the midweek are very crucial because we want to get you guys to start really working together and helping grow your own skills together as a community. So I'm going to stop now and hand it over to Christian. Christian will be happy. If there's any questions you have that wasn't addressed, send us an email. Well, we're happy to get those questions back to you. Nash put the email in there. We'll be more than happy to answer those questions for you. Okay, Christian, over to you.
Yep. Could you please allow me to share the
sorry. Just give me 1 second, Christian. I think what we're going to do now is the networking. I don't know if there's any other person that needs to introduce themselves that missed that at the beginning.
I think Marina,
yes.
yes.
Mhm.
Yes, hello. Okay. I'm Marina. I recently started as a camera consortium manager. I have a background in biomedical engineering. And yeah, I'm also helping out with the SWiM organization and administration of it. So yeah, I'm glad to be part of the team as well.
Thank you, Marina. Marina, I guess we have the breakout sessions ready, right?
Surin is around?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Marina. Surin?
Hello.
Hi, Surin, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah, hello, my name is Surendra Maharjan. Yeah, you can call me Suren. So I completed my PhD from Tokyo Metropolitan University, and after that I joined the Indiana University here in Indianapolis as a research faculty here, and my research is focused on delineating the neurodegenerative diseases, especially the Alzheimer's, using diffusion MRI and structural MRI and other like MRI methods. Yeah, I'm very much glad to be a part of SWiM. Yeah, please feel free to email me if you have any questions. Thank you.
Fantastic. And I think, Christian, can you quickly introduce yourself?
Glad to be here. Well, my name is Christian. I'm from Santiago de Chile, in Latin America, and also I am a MRI researcher. I work in MRI research since 8 years. I have experience in different kind of modalities, especially in research I'm doing right now. My line of investigation is with brain imaging, like in schizophrenia and multiple sclerosis with machine learning. And nowadays, I'm glad to be part of this amazing organization of camera, because also I am part of the ICMRT. It's a group of radiographers that work in research. So it's like I'm glad to be part of this amazing organization, this great teamwork, to bring you with most of the country, all over the world, this cardiac imaging and everything in with education related to MRI.
Thank you. Harrison, did you have a chance to introduce yourself?
Yes, I actually did.
Okay. And I think Francis did too.
Yeah.
Yes.
Before we break into the networking session, can we take the photograph again?
Yeah, so let me just quickly, before we do that, I just want to quickly just bring everybody up to speed. So this is the SWiM team. You guys have met Nash and Dr. Nash and Christian just now. They're the program directors. They were supported by Francis, Turin, and Harrison. And Marina will be, she's the backbone of putting everything you guys see on your 4 waves and getting things going and funneling questions and stuff like that. So this is the team behind the program that you have. And I think we want to do one more group photo. So before we get into the networking, just to move a little bit ahead here, I just want to, before we get into networking, I just want to emphasize again the goal of this. Today we're kind of running out of time, but if you can within this time, sort of start to think about who you want to be the voice for your team, because we will start to have assignments, presentations, stuff like that. We want to be able to have a point person to go to the team and say, well, what's going on with your team? Can you guys get some of your assignments done? So we want you to start thinking about who you want to nominate as this team lead for your team. We want you to give us dates by Monday. So you can, you have your email addresses. It's on your assignment, team assignment. You can contact each other by email. If you want to set up WhatsApp group, that's fantastic. Just make sure you stick to the program code of conduct and be professional within that environment. It's still a workspace. So you can give us a date by Monday. So send us an email with the date, your team, meeting time. We'll set up a meeting access point in 4 ways so you guys to come in every week and meet, because that will be very crucial to you to be able to move ahead and make sure that everybody in your team is sort of pulling their weight and learning together.